Welcome to the AI Brief from the YPO Technology Network. I'm Stephen Forte. Something happened last week that I have not been able to stop thinking about, and it has very little to do with the story most people wrote about it. Two software companies on opposite sides of the world have now done the same strange thing to themselves, and the reason they gave for doing it is not the reason you would guess. There's no homework at the end of this one, nothing to go and ask anybody, nothing to add to a list. What there is, I think, is a genuinely different way to look at your own company. And one number on your dashboard that I believe just quietly stopped working. Let me give you the paradox first. On the 22nd of July, a company called Monday.com filed a notice with the American Securities Regulator, the agency that public companies have to report material decisions to. If you do not know them, they make work management software, the sort of thing your teams use to run projects. Israeli company built out of Tel Aviv, listed in New York. In that filing, they announced they were reducing their global workforce by about 20%, around 620 people, restructuring charges of 45 to 55 million US dollars, which is simply the accounting cost of doing it. And in the same breath, they reaffirmed their revenue guidance for the year. 1.47 billion US dollars, growth of 19 to 20%, grow 20%, shrink 20%, same announcement. Now, the easy story here is the one you have read 100 times. Software company quietly automates its own staff, the machines take the jobs, and so it begins. The company went out of its way to say that is not what happened, which would be easy to dismiss as public relations, except that the explanation they offered instead is far more interesting and much harder to invent. Here is their co-chief executive, Eran Zinman, in a memo he then published himself. The organization we built for our previous chapter, he said, is not the organization that fits the new AI era. And then plainly, this was not made to reduce costs or replace people with AI. This is not a distress signal. It is a deliberate reset. So what was actually broken? This is the part worth writing down. He described work that could have been done in a few days, instead taking many months with multiple meetings and endless friction. And then he said something I have almost never heard a chief executive say while removing a fifth of a company. This was not people's fault. Everyone, he said, was frustrated by it, and the remedy he describes is not fewer workers. It is a flatter organization, fewer management layers, smaller and more autonomous teams, so that people can actually make a decision and move. Sit with what is being claimed there, because it is not the claim in the headlines. The constraint that AI relieved in his telling was not the cost of labor. It was coordination, the meetings, the handoffs, the waiting for someone to approve something, the way 3 days of real work gets stretched across 3 months inside any company past a certain size. He is not saying the machine did the work. He is saying the machine made a great deal of the coordination unnecessary. And once you no longer need that much coordination, you no longer need that much structure to hold it. Every layer of management any of us has ever added was, at some level, a bridge across that gap. He is claiming the gap narrowed. That is a claim about organizational design. It is a much larger claim than automation, and a much less comfortable one. And he is not the only one making it, which is why this is getting a whole episode rather than a passing mention. Back in March, Atlassian did the same thing. Australian company out of Sydney, also listed in New York, also builds work software considerably larger. They cut about 1,600 people, roughly 10%. At the time, their trailing revenue was around 6.2 billion US dollars, and their most recent quarter had grown 32%. Their chief executive, Mike Cannon-Brookes, then wrote the most honest paragraph any executive has produced on this subject all year, and I want to give him full credit for it, because I mean it. We fundamentally believe, he wrote, that people in AI create the best outcomes. Our approach is not that AI replaces people, but it would be disingenuous to pretend AI does not change the mix of skills we need or the number of roles required in certain areas. It does. This is primarily about adaptation. That is a straight answer to the question nearly every leader is currently ducking. He did not pretend nobody was affected. He did not hide behind the machines. He said the mix changes, and in some places the change is a smaller number. But the word in the Atlassian announcement I keep coming back to is a different one. They said they were restructuring in order to self-fund further investment in AI and enterprise sales. Self-fund, not raise, not borrow, not push the investment into next year's plan. A company growing 32% decided the money for its AI program was already sitting inside the business and went and found it in the organization chart. If you have sat in a budget meeting this year wondering where the AI money is supposed to come from, that is one company's answer, said out loud, with a filing behind it. It does not arrive as a new line. It comes out of the shape of what you already have. Now, let me put the awkward case next to the two tidy ones, because you should never take a pattern from two examples without looking at a third. Salesforce has also cut staff through this year across several rounds, and the coverage generally ties it to their AI strategy. But there was no single announcement, no clean date, no framing of the kind the other two offered. Honestly, some of that looks like ordinary efficiency work wearing AI language, because AI language is what the market currently pays for. And that distinction matters more than it sounds. A company restructuring because the technology genuinely changed what is possible is doing something different from a company trimming costs and reaching for the fashionable explanation. Both of them will use very similar words. Only one of them is information. So here is where all of this reaches your own business. And it does not arrive through any of those three companies. On its earnings call earlier this year, Monday.com said something quietly remarkable. The AI productivity gains we are seeing inside our own organization, they said, demonstrate that we can grow revenue without growing headcount in lockstep. Without growing headcount in lockstep, do the arithmetic on that. Before this decision, Monday.com was generating roughly 460,000 US dollars of revenue for every employee. Afterwards, on the same revenue guidance, that figure lands somewhere near 567,000. Atlassian moves from about 387,000 to around 430,000. I want to flag, honestly, that both of those are illustrative because the actual post-restructuring results have not been reported yet. But look at the size of the move. Revenue per employee at Monday.com jumps about 22%. Not from a better year, not from a price increase, from a redrawn structure announced on a Wednesday. For 30 years, revenue per employee in software has been a slow, dull, dependable measure of how well a company is run. It moved a few points a year. You could benchmark against it. Boards judge management on it. Buyers price companies with it. Your own headcount plan for next year almost certainly has it baked in somewhere. If that number can move 20% in an afternoon because somebody redrew a structure, then it has stopped measuring the thing you think it measures. Now, here is my read, and then I will leave you alone with it. I do not think we know yet whether these two companies are right. That is the honest position, and I would rather give you that than a tidier one. Neither of them has published who actually left by role. So anyone telling you this week that AI is coming from middle management is telling you something the evidence does not currently support. There is no serious independent research on it either. And I would note that phrases like deliberate reset and not a distress signal are doing public relations work as well as descriptive work. They may be entirely true. They are still claims made by people with an interest in how you receive them. What I do believe is that these are the two most interesting data points of the month, precisely because both companies sell AI for a living. Whatever they privately believe about what this technology does, they have just bet their own organization charts on it. That is worth considerably more than any vendor presentation you will sit through this year. And if the thing AI actually compresses is coordination rather than labor, then the question in front of you is not how many people you need. It is a harder and better one, where inside your company does 3 days of work still take 3 months, and how much of your structure exists only to manage that gap. For 30 years, growth meant hiring. Two companies just grew and shrank at the same time and called it neither cost-cutting nor automation. If they are right, then the number you have been using to judge how well a company is run is the number that is about to stop meaning what you think. That is the YPO Tech Network AI brief for Wednesday, July 29th. I'm Stephen Forte. If this was useful, send it to a fellow member. I'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, stay sharp.